Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. Today, in our simple baking or decorating tutorials live, we are getting back to the basics of cake decorating. If you've been on this channel before, you have seen me um, layer a cake, put a cake together, decorate it beautifully presented. But before we get to all those aspects of the decorating process, the formative stages of the decorating process starts with a cake, obviously, that needs leveling. So today we are going to be leveling two 7-inch cakes and a 5-inch cake here. If possible, that is, if time will allow me, I'll be talking you through why we need to level a cake, the reasons for which leveling is necessary, where it may not necessarily be a thing to consider, what it adds to the decorating process, and how to put a cake together after leveling. I already have a video on this channel that I have, it's part of a beginner's basic series that I discuss leveling two ways. You can level with a knife. There are various techniques out there that you can employ to level a cake. But today I'm going to keep things really super simple so that I can show you some simple beginner friendly ways to level a cake. Now, what is simply leveling? Leveling is a simple process of keeping all your cakes level. Essentially, the name tells you what exactly it is. When a cake is baked, there are certain things that can affect how you layer the cake for a straight or stable finish. And sometimes the baking process can leave your cake with a dome, or it can leave your cake slightly lopsided. So leveling is essentially trying to get your cake very level, which will aid the stacking process. It helps to make the decorating process very easy and hassle free for you. It also lends to giving you the best outcomes for your cake, because definitely you don't want a lopsided cake. Between leveling, which is just trying to take the lopsidedness off to leave a level cake, is also torting. They come in tandem with each other, in that torting is also the slicing of your cake into layers that levels it out ready for stacking. So essentially, we are leveling and also stacking our cake here, which is a 7-inch and a 5-inch. Now, sometimes when you bake a cake, you end up with a dome. And why do domes form? There is no particular reason why domes form, but one of the ways domes form is inherent with the type of recipe and how the cake rises. So depending on what recipe you have, it is likely, like, inherently your cake will end up forming a dome over the cake. And now when you have a dome over your cake, it is hard to stack the cake for a very level and stable cake. So for that reason, naturally you want to level the cake to even it out so that you have a flat level surface so that you can build your cake layers on. Leveling is important for single tier cakes, but even most critically for tiered cakes. So today I have a 7-inch cake that is not exactly domed. It has baked flat, but it is slightly lopsided, in that if I put this cake at eye level for you and you look, you can see that the left side of the cake, which will be your right side facing me, is a little higher than the other side of the cake. If I had to stack the cake like this, I will end up with a cake that is very lopsided and sketchy. I'm going to try and make a tiered cake out of this. So it is critically important that this cake is level, for which I will have to level the cake. Now, with leveling comes the use of certain tools. I have the most basic of tools here, which is a simple wire cake leveler. Now, there are different brands of levelers and different tools on the market, some of which are super advanced that efficiently help you dispense your task so easily. I am not mad about that. But the idea of this video today is to teach you what the leveling process is about, the techniques to employ to do that, and for you to decide for yourself whether you want to employ a very expensive tool to help you complete this task, or you want to stick with a simple leveler. Now, these simple wire levelers were picked up on Amazon. You can see they are slightly different. One of them is a PME one and one of them is a Wilton. I'm not sure which is which, but I had had this for a very long time in my baking career, a very long time. And I happened to visit a friend whose house I forgot this over because I had gone to make a cake with family friends. Sometimes we undertake baking as activities, and I forgot that over there. So I was forced to replace that temporarily with this one, which I picked up on Amazon. I think for the purposes of this video, it probably serves a good thing that we have two different levelers, and I'll tell you the shortfalls of how they affect things. With that said, if you don't have a cake leveler, you can level with a simple knife. Now, we have different types of knife. You have the sharp knife and you have the serrated knife. I'll talk you through what choices you can make in terms of the knives you have. Certainly not a knife with this edge on it, surely. But otherwise, we'll talk you through that. So if you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Gladys, and as said, over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate the baking and decorating processes. Over here, there is a ton of videos on the live feed and also on edited long form content with daily shorts videos to help you undertake your baking with all the confidence in your own home. So if you're new here, hello and welcome. I see some of you in the chats, my everyday regular people. We talk all the time on the community post. And if you're new here and you see me for the first time, be sure that my value proposition to you as a cake maker decorator is that I've been baking nearly 10 years now. And before I even got into putting a cake together, my life had nothing to do with cakes at all. I do nothing about cakes except the cake to eat. But even so, I was very particular about the cake I wanted to eat. And most of the time, the cake I would come across were the dry cakes with so sweet buttercream. Well, a few things led to something, and then eventually I became a cake maker. I have started a short series where I discuss my journey from a carer support worker transitioning to baking and decorating to actually now creating content, tutoring all things cake, and also bringing you helpful, useful, relatable information to help inspire you so you can undertake baking at home in your own time. So, whilst you're here, hello, all of you. There is Dolly, there is Viv in the chat. Such a pleasure to have all of you. Well, I think Viv has something to say about the levelers. We'll be talking all about that in a minute. But I say that all to say, if you're a beginner, this is the channel for you because before I ever put a cake together, I had the pleasure of having a lot of help on this platform. However, as helpful as much of the videos I came across were, there were still limitations and limited information and some information that I wish I could have access to, which I didn't. So my value proposition to you on this channel is that I give you simple, informative tutorials. We don't gatekeep anything. And in fact, I consider these tutorials as learning resources for you so that if you land on the page and you know nothing about cakes, you will be able to start from somewhere and finish from somewhere. So I hope that is of some use to you and that you are encouraged to learn from the channel and continue to support us. And for that reason, if you haven't subscribed yet, do consider hitting the subscribe button. Join the community of supportive people here and also click your notification bell to leave it on so you are notified of videos such as these and more. So with that said, let's jump straight into this cake. Now, this is so basic that I was naturally tempted to undertake this in my own time and then come back and help you set the cake together. But I also thought that it might be a good thing for those of you who are new to baking and decorating to be able to learn something new from the process, which is why I brought the cake here. Now, if you want to put a cake together, you want to make sure that the cake is level and the cake is straight standing. Think about a cake as building a house. A series of elements and tasks will lead you to having a well-structured house that doesn't fall over. So if you don't take anything out of this video, my hope is that you will start thinking of the cake decorating process as a very intentional process of building a safe house which will remain put together and structured so that it doesn't collapse on the inhabitants of this house. Thankfully, we don't have inhabitants of this cake. But if you want to have a cake that is aesthetically pleasing, that is put together, that is well appreciated and well presented, you want to ensure that your tasks at the formative stages from the foundation for which you build a house is solid. And part of that all involves also making sure that your cake layers, which in this case I like to think of as the bricks of your house, are all level and set well for you. For that reason, sometimes, like I said earlier, depends on what cake and your outcome of the bake that is. That is, if you have a dough, you will have to level out the dome to leave a flat surface that is eventually torted. Torting is the process of slicing the cake into layers, which will eventually be stacked together. So for this, I just have a simple lopsided cake that needs leveling out. Now, the tools that I would require, I'll be leveling the cake two ways. But like I said, I will be recommending or linking the videos of the basic series that talks you through the process of leveling. This is a hands-on approach for you to see exactly what is happening here. But the long-form content should kind of fill in the gaps for what information I missed in this tutorial right here. So over here are these simple wire levelers. I would say they are not the best and do come with limitations. In that, for instance, for this leveler, let's take a measurement and see how wide that is. And then we'll talk about that. This is almost about 15 inches wide, as in you have a wire of about 15 inches here, which means if you have a cake that is larger than 15 inches, or if it's inching close to 15 inches, it is going to be hard to kind of saw through the middle. I have a confession. Whilst I talk about leveling a cake, for the first 4 or 5 years of my baking career, I didn't know how to use a simple leveler. I thought it involved trying to saw the entire thing and moving the cake around. And I actually broke one of the wires on my leveler. It broke on the side here until I took a class with a baking tutor who was incredibly kind and so giving, who actually leveled the cake with me. And I realized that it is a very simple task. So, whilst a leveler may come with its own limitations, which I'll be talking about in a minute, you want to also consider how you level a cake. In that, sometimes what is simple may not be as simple as, and the way you use a tool will aid your outcomes for you. So, with that said, with a leveler like this, we have 15 inches. It's going to be easy to level a cake like a 7 inch because you have enough space in between. But let's talk about the leveler itself. For a simple wire leveler like this, you have ridges on the side here, which are numbered. They are numbered to stay on equal parts of the equal sides of the part of the leveler. So the ridges on this side, ridges match this side. So if you are aligning, the process of leveling means you want to align the numbers. You count down, you move the leveler across, make sure both are on the same number to keep it straight, and then you mark it against your cake. Naturally, sometimes you have to mark the cake first and then gauge how you want to move your wire across to form your line before you saw through the cake. With that said, the limitation here is that the wire can be a little bit flimsy, and if used improperly, it can break. If you also have a cake that doesn't have a very soft crust, I've experienced that before. If you have a cake that has dry, crusty, as in brown sides that are hard, it can be hard for this leveler to kind of saw through because the wire doesn't come with much cutting ability over here. So the limitations of using a leveler like this are apparent and obvious. But I'll tell you this. For my entire baking and decorating career, I have had this leveler and haven't been motivated to use any other. There are quite some efficient ones on the market. A very market brand one we know is the, is it the, I can spell it, is the AGB AY saw of, I can't pronounce the name. I don't want to get it wrong, but I'll link it in the description box. A very, very good, efficient leveler that most cake baker decorators that I know recommend highly. I do preferably have, by my own preference and bias, have some fears about it because it comes with a very sharp blade, and sometimes in my head I kind of feel like I'm going to lose a finger using that. But that brand of leveler isn't the only one on the market that seemingly is efficient. You have other brands like, is it the Big Daddy or something? There are a few brands of levelers out there. My point is, you can get an expensive tool that is efficient enough to help you complete the task, but you are going to have to understand what task you're completing and how you want to complete the task. So the choice of the tool is completely up to you. But over here, a simple leveler like this for this task works because this cake is soft on the side here. We have a 7-inch, almost half the length of this leveler, which means I'm going to have some sort of freedom to do that rather easily. Now, if I picked up this kind of leveler, which is shorter, we have this as 15 inches, and we have this, the small one, as a 12-inch leveler, which means you will not be able to level a cake past 12 inches. But even the entire height of the leveler, if it's 12 inches, your widest cake you can level is up to 10 inches. You want to be careful with that. And actually, considering how this is bent on this side, it can be difficult to get an even saw of your cake through. So even though these are simple and efficient and less expensive, it has taken my experience and knowledge of the process to be able to use them effectively. So they are not my most recommended. If I recommend a leveler, I won't be recommending the 10-inch. I'll definitely be recommending the 15-inch here for you to use. But like I said, understanding your own needs will determine what tools you want to get. Now, in light of these extra tools that you have to purchase, which makes leveling or getting your cake very level okay, you don't necessarily need a leveler to level a cake. Traditionally, all you need is a knife. Now, I went and stuck my knife in woodwork and I broke bits of it. So squint and don't look at it. But the consideration here is that if you don't have a leveler, you can use a knife. And there are so many techniques that will teach you how to use a knife to level a cake. And one of the simple ones is when you're told to pin toothpicks around the cake and all of that. For me, leveling a cake with a knife comes with the use of a simple ruler and obviously the knife. So you look at the height of the cake and then you measure and mark it, and then you use the knife. I'll show you how to do that. The good thing is that we have two cakes, so we can use the leveler for one and we can use a knife for the other. The difference between the knife and the leveler is fairly easy and efficient for the task. The knife requires understanding how to cut through the cake without making your cake lopsided. So it requires a bit of technique and manpower to execute the task. But my encouragement will always be learn the technique better and have a mastery over that, because then even if you decide to transition from that to using a tool to support you, that will be fantastic. But if you don't understand how to use basic tools, your equipment may give up on you and then you will be stuck. So how about the day you go to use a leveler and the wire snaps and you don't know how to level a cake with a knife? That will be slightly problematic. So I will always encourage you, wherever possible and necessary or applies to you, understand the use of the process from the start or the basics and employ a tool to make it more efficient for you. With that said, for a very long time, I struggled to level my cakes until I mastered it before transitioning to the use of a leveler. So you could use a sharp, fine-edged knife, or you can use a serrated knife. The most important thing to know about using a knife for leveling is to ensure that the knife is sharp for the purpose and it has length. Just like the leveler, if you have a short bladed knife or tool, it will not cut through the cake and it will leave you stuck. So for instance, this knife is fairly, could probably help me execute the task of leveling this cake. But if I had a larger cake of say 9-10 inches, this serrated knife is going to be too short to help me achieve efficient leveling. For that matter, I would require a longer serrated knife. So you want to make sure that you have a knife that will help you um, execute your task and also give you great results. And after all of that, I'm going to move the cakes out of the way, and then we are going to start with the leveling of the cake. Now, if you are going to if you're going to be leveling a cake with a knife, you probably definitely need a cake board and a turntable. I have spoken a ton about the use of a turntable, which is here. So, simple run through of what I have here. I have a basic, affordable £10 turntable, and there is a non-slip mat, which stops the cake from shifting and sliding. I have a cake card. This is a 10-inch cake card that goes over the cake mat. And then I have my first of the cake, which is a 5-inch cake here. Now, what a turntable does in the process of leveling is that a turntable comes with a mechanism that turns the cake evenly, you know, because there's a wheel in between the bottom and the top of the cake, which makes you turn the cake. So when you come to leveling the cake, it makes turning around the cake much more easy. And I'm going to show you that. But whilst we're at it, I'm just going to get in the chat and see what questions I have over there, and I will answer them as I go along. Vivian did say she bought one of these levelers and then it snapped on her. So she had to learn how to use the serrated knife. Vivian, how is the use of serrated knife coming along for you? I imagine that would, even though that is rather difficult and very task centered, that has kind of helped you sharpen your ability to level a cake more efficiently, right? Um, is it is it Nini May? Nini May. I could have gotten your name wrong. I am so sorry. And Layla. May says she loves to decorate, but she's not great at baking. Look, May, if you're not great at baking, that is fine. There are so many ways one can learn to decorate a cake without really undertaking the baking. It depends on what your goals are. In that, if you want to obviously set up a business, the baking aspect has got to be important because a well decorated cake has to still taste great. But baking is the science of the process and decorating is the art. So you can be the artist and not the scientist. And a few things you can do differently is hire somebody or get help from somebody who actually is into the science, because not all bakers are decorators. I tend to have the advantage of both. I love the science of baking and I also enjoy the art of decorating cakes. But that is not the same for everybody. If you saw somebody who enjoys a good brownie and can nerd out on recipes and how things are put together, that is a food scientist who just enjoys the science of it. And perhaps if you ask them to make a layered cake and put it together, they'll be absolutely bored out of their brain, and that will not be an enjoyable process. So, May, if you enjoy cake decorating but do not enjoy baking, it's not a bad thing. You can focus on what you're good at and enhance that over time. So, for instance, if you're just a beginner who is beginning and you recognize where your strengths are, a few things you can do is consider outlets that do wholesale baking. I mean, sometimes if you're just trying to practice as an individual who's just started on the journey, then perhaps you can pick some bakery style shop bought cakes, put them together, and enjoy the art of decorating cakes. But over time, if you want to be decorating cakes for family members or for people to compliment and enjoy the mouth feel and taste of the cake, you might have to resort to certain options, as in considering wholesale bakers, because there are bakery houses that just specialize in baking cakes for you to buy wholesale or in some form so you can put it together and decorate it, and it doesn't take away from the quality of cakes at all. So May, that is something you can consider. But if you've subscribed here, it's a pleasure to have you and thank you for the support. Layla has just subscribed. Layla, I hope you find some value in this video and learn something from the basic series, which is just trying to level this cake. With that said, some of the common ways, some of the common ways you'll find that a cake can be leveled is to stick some toothpicks around the cake and then use a thread or a yarn to cut through it. I find that super tedious and very unnecessary. A simple way to do that is to consider using a knife and a ruler. And for this cake, this is a small 5-inch cake, and if I put the ruler across, it stands exactly at 3 inches tall. So because the cake is domed at the top, the dome, right. So the bigger cake wasn't domed, the bigger cake was lopsided. The difference is that this is slightly domed in that it has a rounded shape on it. So I could easily, I also want to, whilst we're talking about leveling, sometimes the goal is also not to lose too much cake. So your goals and aims for the decorating process will determine what tools you want to achieve. I find that sometimes when I just want to take out just a small bit of cake, it can be difficult to use the leveler because the leveler is matched against a certain number, which limits the height of the cake. So if I just wanted to take this dome, just a small bit out, it can be hard to do that. So with that said, for me to be able to take this dome out just the way I want it, I might have to use a knife. And thankfully, in this case, I do have a knife. So for this 3-inch, if I just wanted to tort it, which is to cut the cake into slices, which becomes layers, consider that bricks of cake, I'll just go for the center. But the first point here is that I want to level the top so that I have a level cake. So where do you start? Okay, over here we have the turntable. The advantage of the turntable is it allows you to turn the cake easily without much work and without much effort. So with the cake centered on the turntable, ensure you have your hand placed on the cake. And if you are doing this with me at home, I would just ask you to kind of push the cake and then it will turn. With that said, ensure that you can center the cake with your arm over the cake. If you're a beginner, you might just want to understand or have a mark where you are working from. It's so easy for me to kind of eyeball this because of experience, but I just want you to get some value out of it. So look at the cake closely and determine where you want to mark the cake at. Remember, your goals and intention for the leveling will affect where you determine the mark. For me, for this small cake, I want to take out the part of the dome that forms this shape over the cake so I can have a level top. So I am not looking to take out too much cake, because if I had 2 of these cakes, then yes, I will probably go for a bit more of the cake, but I don't want to lose more cake because I want to make this into 3 layers of a 5-inch cake, and taking too much out of the cake is going to affect the size of the cake for me, and I'll end up losing too much cake, and I don't want to do that. So I have just stuck a toothpick somewhere just on the top edge of the cake to help me keep to the side of the cake where I want to level. With the toothpick in there, I'll stick the knife on just above the toothpick or on the line of the toothpick. I've just stuck the toothpick in there for you to see what I'm doing. But if I was doing this on my own, I will take the toothpick up so that I can level the cake. But I've just left it there as a guide so you can visually spot where I'm leveling the cake from. Now, when you are leveling the cake, you want to make sure that you're holding the knife. Is it perpendicular? Look, don't quote me on it. But the point is that ensure that the knife is straight and doesn't move at an angle. You want to make sure if I turn the cake this way, the knife is parallel to me here. And that is the angle you want to keep the knife. Because what you don't want to do is move the knife at an angle. Because if you move it at an angle, you are going to saw into the cake. And if you keep it up an angle, it's going to kind of leave ridges in the cake. So you keep your hand straight and you make sure that your elbow is closer to you so you can have control of the cake. Now, very, very important for you to know, the intention here is not to saw through the cake, because if you're sawing through the cake, it means you are losing control and you could lose direction of the knife, and that this is sawing. We're not doing that. I'm just taking the sawing motion just to show you something. But what you're doing is you're keeping the knife in the cake and you're turning the cake around. If your knife is sharp enough, it should move and take off the edge. Now, one of the disadvantages of sawing is that you are likely to get an angled point and then end up with a lopsided cake. But if you keep the angle of your knife straight as recommended, it should be okay for you. Yeah, and just like that, I have leveled the top of my cake and the dome is here, and that's it, right? But you also want to make sure that your cake is on a level surface, because if your cake is not level, you'll end up with lopsidedness in your cake. So with that done, I'm going to clean this part and I am going to tort the cake. Torting is the slicing of the cake into layers. And with that, you can decide how many layers you want to get out of one cake. I still have 3 inches, so I could go for an inch if I choose to. I could measure it, but okay, just to give you a wholesome experience, I am going to this is 3 inches, so I'm aiming to kind of level it into an inch and a half each. So I have just done that, and just like I did the top, I have the cake knife right in the cake, and all I'm doing is moving the cake whilst keeping the knife at the same angle, and all I'm doing is moving the cake around so that the point of start meets the end point of the cake. When you do that, you can then keep moving the cake around on the inside to slice the cake into two, and just like that, we have a level cake. I hope that is helpful to you. So having sliced the cake into two, I'm going to move that to the side, and then we'll get the first off. Now, like I said, my intention is not to lose too much cake. So I only have a lopsided cake here that I just want to keep just a bit of. So I'm just going to go ahead and level that side out. As you can see, the cake is sitting and all I'm doing is moving the knife around it until that lopsidedness has come off. So we've got that, but I am going to then level the rest of the 7-inch with a leveler so that you see. But because I've got 2 cakes, I'm going to bring the other one too. And both of the cakes have got lopsidedness on them. One is actually worse than the other, which is this is over here. We have the lopsidedness over there. So again, I am just going to stick a knife in there and then move. All I'm doing is just moving this whilst keeping the knife straight. As you can see, the knife is not doing anything that I am not moving the cake into. And with that, there you go. I have taken off that part of the cake, and just like that, we have a level top of a cake over here. So now that I've leveled the top of the cake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set both cakes together, clean up, and then we're going to level using the leveler. At this point, actually, I will recommend that whilst I do actually encourage you to learn how to use the tool, to learn how to use to learn the techniques by hand if necessary, I do understand how critical that leveling can be to the making of the cake or the decorating process. So if you're not absolute confident about leveling your cake properly, consider using a leveler as a beginner. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's a convenience thing, in that if you're able to learn how to level your cake freehand without the use of tools, it will come handy on the day your tool gives up on you, because tools are not meant to last, right? So some days you can't always rely on them. But with that intention in mind, you could consider a tool that is efficient and effective for your task, and you will not be at a loss. So my encouragement is to consider your circumstances and go for what supports your goals, tasks, and outcomes. With that said, I have leveled that using the knife. So I have just cleared that, and we are back with the cake. We're going to be leveling using the 12 inch here. Now we know that the cake stands at 3 inches high over here. So I know that I want to level my cakes at 1.5 inches each. You want to be careful that, because sometimes the slicing may not be as exact as you might want it. So over here, I have 3 inches. So 1.5 inches is somewhere here. So I've just stuck a toothpick in there, and what you want to do is see if you can adjust this to the same height. Sometimes you will be a little off or below. You just have to make an adjustment and gauge what is acceptable. So over here we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 ridges. So the 10 ridges all stand at about 2.5 inches high. That is how, not the entire length of the leveler, but the 10 ridges from ridge 1 to ridge 10, and the bottom stands at 2.5 inches. So I have already gone ahead and figured out that the ridge that will cut 1.5 inches into the cake equally is about ridge number 5, right in the middle here for me. So all you have to do, sometimes the temptation is, if you're not aware or you're unsure what you're doing, you start moving the cake and you are soaring vigorously through the cake. That's not how to level a cake. Plus, I've already intimated that the intention for leveling has to consider other aspects of the cake as well. That if you have a crusty, hard shell to the cake, it can be difficult to get the saw through it, because this wire is very flimsy and it's a bit blunt also. So that is something to consider. So sometimes for certain cakes, you want a solid, sharp blade, which will probably make it more efficient if you had other branded levelers. But in this case, the wire is effective. So all you have to do is keep the cake in place. The cake doesn't move. Keep your hand on it, and all you have to do is, it's a back and forth motion, not vigorously, just back and forth motion through the cake. If the cake is not aligned, if the wire is not aligned in number, for instance, if side A has the wire at 5, and you have side B at 4, it means you have a skewered line, which will affect how you level the cake. But in this case, we have leveled the cake, and just like that, we have a perfectly leveled cake. And why is leveling even important? Leveling is important for the stability of a cake and lends to the evenness of the structure one is aiming for. So just like that, we have the cake all leveled here. Now I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to wipe my surface again. And we are going to get this in shot. And yet again, I'm going to put that away. We have 3 inches again. So because the cakes were baked almost the same, I can tell. And then just like that. So the cake remains in place. As you can see, the cake is not moving. All I'm doing is moving the leveler across. And just like that, we have, well, that's the cake falling. We have a perfectly level cake here. If you can see how level this cake is, we know we are headed for a very level cake when the cake is eventually put together. So these are some of the ways you can level a cake. And with that said, if I was making a single tiered cake, by putting the cake together, you can already tell you have got some result with the cake leveled here. My table is not very set in terms of how level it is, but we've put the cake together, which looks level. And if we come to stacking the cake, if there are any structural issues, we will be able to kind of fix those along the way in the decorating process. So at least I hope that this video has become of some use to you and that you have learned how to level a cake 2 ways using a cake leveler and of course a knife, being a sharp fine blade or a serrated knife.